I kicked my fiancé's crazy ex-wife out of our wedding after she tried to ruin it by exposing my past. A week ago, I 27F married Brett 33M, unfortunately. Instead of enjoying our newlywed life, we were suddenly hit with a wave of negativity, mainly from my husband's family because we kicked his ex-wife out of the wedding after she tried to ruin our day. For context, Brett was married to Jessie for 2 years. They had been dating since high school, and then Jessie unexpectedly got pregnant at 18, even though she and Brett had always been careful. When Jessie told him the news, Brett made it clear that he didn't want to become a father so young since they had just started college, but he emphasized that he would support whatever decision she made. Jessie's parents also asked her not to have the baby at such a young age, but she insisted on keeping it. Brett and his family respected her choice, and eventually, she gave birth to a son, Thomas. Jessie had to drop out of college to take care of the baby since her parents weren't very supportive. Brett and his family sent her monthly payments for the child, as agreed, and helped her in every possible way. Brett regularly visited Thomas whenever he came home from college and eventually grew very attached to him, although he hadn't wanted to be a father at first. He was now happy Thomas was in his life and gradually started taking a more active role in raising him. Jessie was close to Brett's parents, so she and Thomas often stayed at their house. When Brett graduated and found a good job, his parents sat him down and told him they wanted him to take responsibility and marry Jessie so they could be a proper family and raise Thomas together. After much discussion, Brett agreed, and he and Jessie got married. Later, Brett admitted to me that he was never happy in that marriage because he was too young and felt pressured by his parents. He wanted his son to be happy and thought marrying Jessie was the right thing to do. Unfortunately, their relationship quickly became toxic. It should be said that Brett is a very handsome guy and sometimes got attention from other women, which Jessie couldn't stand. He never cheated on her or even flirted with other women, but Jessie soon began showing aggression and jealousy because of her own insecurities. If he came home even 10 minutes later than usual, she would start yelling, accusing him of cheating, and claiming he was sleeping with his coworkers. Brett tried to calm her down in every way possible, but Jessie threatened to run away with Thomas or to tell Thomas that his father was a cheater. Their fights became daily, and Jessie even started reaching out to Brett's female coworkers on social media. Then she would casually drop their names into conversations and ask Brett if he found them attractive. Even when Brett said no because he genuinely didn't, she would jump up, scream, call him a liar, and accuse him of sleeping with them. She didn't like it when he went to his friend's house on weekends, even though they were just playing video games all day, and she insisted Brett take Thomas with him. Brett agreed, not because he wanted to obey her, but because he didn't mind having his son spend time with him and his friends. Brett's friends were great guys. They all loved Thomas, so no one complained when Brett brought him along to their gaming sessions. Overall, Brett did everything he could to help Jessie cope with her insecurities and wild suspicions, but unfortunately, she never changed. One day, Brett had to go on a business trip to meet a very important client and close a deal. Initially, he planned to go alone, but at the last minute, his boss, Kaylee, decided to join him since the client was crucial and they needed to make a good first impression. When Brett told Jessie about it, she as expected exploded, accusing him once again of sleeping with everyone at the office. She accused him of making up excuses just so he could go with his boss, where they could do whatever they wanted. Brett begged her to understand the situation, even showed her the client's profile, trying to explain how important and wealthy this person was, and that his boss was only going to help him close the deal. But Jessie didn't care. She kept yelling. She insisted that Brett should cancel the trip and let his boss go alone. At that point, Brett lost his patience and firmly told her that it was just a one-night trip and he wasn't going to refuse it since it could help him get a promotion. They kept arguing, but Brett still went on the business trip, promising to be back soon. Unfortunately, the trip unexpectedly extended for another day because the client needed more assurance. Brett discussed it with Jessie and thought everything was fine now. But when he came home, he found the house empty. Panicking, he called Jessie. But her sister Natalie answered the phone and told him that Jessie and Thomas would be staying with her for a few days because Jessie couldn't look at Brett after what he'd done. Brett was confused and asked Natalie what she meant, since he'd just been on a business trip. But Natalie started accusing him of cheating and called him a disgusting person for doing something like that. Brett tried to explain, but Natalie cut him off, so he decided to drive over and talk to Jessie in person. When Brett arrived at Natalie's house, he and Jessie had a serious argument because he insisted on seeing Thomas. Brett tried to reason with Jessie and even showed Natalie proof that he had. Indeed met with the client and signed a very important deal that would help his career. He asked Jessie if she had any proof at all of the accusations she was making. Jessie, however, started hinting that since he stayed one more day, it obviously meant he'd spent the night with his boss. Otherwise, why would he delay coming home? By that point, Brett was exhausted from trying to defend himself. But Jessie stubbornly clung to her fantasies about his supposed affair. After seeing Thomas, Brett told Jessie that the relationship clearly wasn't working and that there was no point in staying together anymore. He said he wanted a divorce but hoped they could keep things civil for their son's sake. Jesse clearly didn't expect that and started screaming at him, accusing him of abandoning his family and hurling insults at him. She even threatened to ruin his life. But Brett had finally realized he couldn't live with her any longer. It was starting to affect his mental health. He stood his ground and left Natalie's house. Eventually, he told his parents about everything, and they were shocked. But after seeing how broken and miserable he was after 2 years of marriage, they finally understood him. Jessie, in her anger and desperation, decided to message Brett's boss, Kaylee, through social media. She sent her an extremely inappropriate and lengthy message, accusing her of sleeping with Brett and of many other things. I don't know exactly what happened afterward, but Brett told me that Kaylee called him in for a talk and showed him the message. He felt horribly ashamed and begged her to forgive him for Jesse's behavior. Thankfully, Kaylee was understanding. Brett told her how toxic his marriage had become and how Jesse had left home after his business trip. After hearing the full story, Kaylee was sympathetic and offered Brett as many days off as he needed to sort out his personal life. That became the final straw that completely ended their marriage. Brett immediately contacted a lawyer to file for divorce and end things for good. According to Brett, the divorce process was extremely difficult for him because Jesse made the most ridiculous accusations just to drag it out. She and her lawyer also fought for full custody of Thomas. But luckily, the judge saw right through Jesse and granted them joint custody. Recognizing Brett's genuine willingness to be responsible and involved as a parent, when I came into Brett's life, he had already been alone for quite some time. I started working at the company about 1.5 years ago. Gradually, we became friends and began spending time together in a group of colleagues. After a few months, Brett asked me out on a date, which came as a pleasant surprise, because I had always liked him a little. I had never dated coworkers before since I considered it inappropriate and preferred to keep my personal life separate from work. However, Brett proved to me that it was possible. Our relationship developed naturally and easily. Over time, we went from colleagues to friends, and then to a couple. He is the kindest and most honest person I have ever known. When we started dating, Brett was completely open with me about his relationship with his ex-wife. It was painful to hear how much he had suffered from Jesse's toxic behavior. We helped each other become better people, and since then, we have always been together. Everything was wonderful until his ex-wife found out about me about 6 months into our relationship. Of course, I knew what to expect from Jesse based on Brett's stories, but nothing could have prepared me for the hatred she showed the first time we met at a family gathering. I had already met Brett's parents before, and it was actually them who invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. Jessie was also invited because Brett's parents always tried to include her in family events. Of course, I knew what to expect from Jessie based on Brett's stories, but nothing could have prepared me for the hatred she showed the first time we met at a family gathering. I had already met Brett's parents before, and it was actually them who invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. Jessie was also invited because Brett's parents always tried to include her in family events. When Jessie arrived, she completely ignored my presence. Even though I was standing right next to Brett, she hugged him, touched his hair, and commented on how good his new haircut looked. Brett, clearly uncomfortable, gently pulled away from her and wrapped his arm around me, emphasizing that I was his girlfriend. I smiled politely at her, but Jessie gave me an icy glare and walked off immediately. The tension lasted throughout the entire dinner. Jessie constantly made sarcastic remarks directed at me. Since we were sitting at the same table, she said things like how Brett had always preferred blondes and that she never thought he'd end up with someone like me. Every word was carefully chosen to get under my skin, and as the evening went on, it only got worse. I tried to ignore her hostility, focusing on talking with Brett's parents and enjoying the holiday. Brett, sensing my discomfort, would quietly reassure me, putting his arm around me to show his support. From that very first encounter, I completely understood why Brett had divorced her. She was utterly unbearable and full of hatred for no reason at all. I wish I could say that was the only time she behaved that way, but unfortunately, Jessie kept acting terribly. One day, I caught her spreading disgusting rumors about me among Brett's cousins and relatives. She told them that I was the reason for their divorce and that I had stolen Brett from his family. Brett and I confronted her together. I told her that I hadn't even been working at the company yet when they divorced, so her accusations were ridiculous. Jessie just smirked and started accusing me of chasing after his money and tricking him into a relationship. Brett asked her to stop and show me some respect, but of course, she didn't listen. At one point, she even went as far as sending me insulting messages from a fake Instagram account. I knew it was her because the insults contained personal information that only Jessie could know. It felt like we were trapped in a never-ending soap opera we never wanted to be part of. But what hurt me the most was how she involved the child in all this. I had met Thomas a few times before Brett and I started dating, so I already knew him at the beginning of our relationship. Brett never asked me to take on a motherly role, and I didn't really want to. I just wanted to be a good friend and a positive influence for Thomas during difficult times. One day, for his birthday, I gave Thomas a pair of roller skates he'd been dreaming about for a long time. He was absolutely thrilled, and it made me so happy to see how happy he was. However, the next weekend when we met again, I saw him wearing his old skates and asked, Did the new ones I gave you not fit? Thomas admitted that his mother said he couldn't keep them and threw them away despite his tears, and pleased to let him keep them. I felt so hurt that I could barely hold back my tears. My fiancé was horrified and immediately spoke to Jessie about it, but she said I had no right to interact with Thomas or give him any gifts. She told him that she was disgusted that Brett even allowed my presence around their child, and that it made her question him as a father. The cruelty of her words stunned me. When I moved in with Brett, she initially didn't even allow Thomas to come over, claiming she couldn't trust Brett with their son while I was around. Eventually, Brett's parents had to step in and convince her to let the father see his own child. After that, she made our lives even harder, saying that I wasn't allowed to cook for Thomas and started sending containers of food every time he came to visit us. That poor child would heat up those containers for every meal, and it broke my heart. So, after some time, I began cooking him proper homemade meals so that we could all have dinner together, and we simply decided not to tell Jessie about it. It was absurd that we had to lie about something so harmless, and I couldn't understand why Jessie was doing all this. 3 months ago, Brett and I got engaged. It was a wonderful surprise, and I knew without a doubt that he was the person I wanted to spend my life with. Brett's parents insisted on throwing a party in our honor. I invited coworkers and childhood friends. Everyone knew it was our engagement party, and I was certain Jessie wouldn't show up. Unfortunately, she did, and I mentally prepared myself for an unpleasant evening. As expected, she started telling my colleagues and friends that she was the first woman in Brett's life, even though everyone already knew that. It was painfully awkward to watch her trying to draw attention to herself when it was our night. I decided to ignore her and, overall, still had a good time at the celebration. As the wedding approached, my mother and Brett's mother became completely immersed in planning. We worked tirelessly to make sure every detail of the celebration reflected the love and happiness we felt from choosing the perfect venue to the color scheme and flowers. Our days were filled with endless discussions and preparations. Exactly 1 week before the wedding, there was an unexpected knock on the door. That day, I was working from home while Brett was on a business trip. Thinking it was my mom, I opened the door and saw Jessie standing there. It was completely unexpected, so I asked if everything was okay. She looked at me blankly and said she needed to talk. I nodded and let her in. Sitting in our living room, Jessie calmly told me that I needed to break off my engagement with Brett. I was stunned and asked what she was talking about. Then Jessie said she knew about a dirty secret from my past. I smirked and told her to get to the point because I wasn't about to play her childish games. Jessie told me that she'd learned from one of my childhood friends, whom she had met at our engagement party, that I'd had a miscarriage when I was 21. I froze when I heard that because it was such deeply personal information. It was true, I had accidentally gotten pregnant at 21, and I ended up having a miscarriage, which was a deeply traumatic experience for me. I was so young and didn't even realize I was pregnant, but losing that baby was still unbearably painful. I grieved for the life I had barely begun to understand. My close friends and family were there for me and helped me get through that dark time. When Brett and I started dating, I told him about it myself, so I wasn't worried about Jessie telling him. It wouldn't have been a surprise to him. What infuriated me was that she tried to use such a painful and vulnerable part of my past to manipulate me. I firmly told her that she had absolutely no right to discuss my past or threaten me in any way, since all my loved ones had long known about it. Jessie clearly hadn't expected such a reaction and started screaming, calling me a horrible person for killing my child, and swore she would make sure everyone knew how disgusting I was. The argument kept escalating until Jessie finally ran out, leaving me completely shaken. When Brad came home the next day, I told him about that strange conversation, and he immediately decided to call Jessie and put her in her place. He scolded her for trying to come between us and emphasized that he had long known about my past. He defended me, explaining that I had been too young back then to even understand what I was going through, and that she had absolutely no right to use that information against me. Furious, he withdrew Jessie's invitation to our wedding. She screamed back that if she wasn't allowed to come, then Thomas wouldn't attend the wedding either. They argued for a long time but never reached an agreement. I knew Jessie wouldn't give up, so icily, but Brad assured me that he wouldn't let her interfere in our lives anymore and would even speak out publicly against her if necessary. When the day of our wedding finally arrived, the atmosphere was filled with happiness and excitement. I couldn't wait for the moment I would finally marry the love of my life. After I walked down the aisle with my father and the ceremony began, that was when Jessie and her son Thomas suddenly burst into the hall. She was wearing a long cream-colored dress. Everyone turned toward the sudden noise, and Jessie shouted, "Stop the wedding." My face went pale. I turned to Brad, whose face was red with anger and embarrassment. Then Jessie loudly demanded that I not marry Brad or she would immediately tell everyone my secret. My eyes widened in horror while the guests looked around in confusion. Thomas stood there helplessly, clearly not wanting to be part of what was happening. Jessie walked toward us, shouting what a terrible person I was and that I didn't deserve a man like Brad. Before I could say anything, Brad stepped between us and ordered her to leave immediately, or he would call the police. Jessie's eyes widened in shock. She clearly hadn't expected such a firm reaction from him. She started yelling at Brad, asking how he could even think of marrying a woman like me. By that point, I was already in tears. And what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives was turning into a complete nightmare. Fortunately, two of Brad's cousins, who were also my bridesmaids, calmly but firmly intervened. They escorted Jessie out of the hall, warning her that if she didn't leave, they would call the police, and it would have serious consequences for her. Jessie eventually backed off, still shouting insults and accusations, while Brad insisted that Thomas stay at our wedding. The atmosphere remained tense, but Brad's parents and mine came up to hug us when they saw my tear-streaked face. Even Brad's parents, who had always maintained a good relationship with Jessie, were shocked by her behavior. The priest asked if we wanted to continue the ceremony, and Brad, holding me close, nodded. We decided to save what was left of that once joyful day, and despite everything, we tried to enjoy ourselves. After the wedding, we went on our honeymoon and didn't check our phones. But when we returned, we found numerous messages from Jessie's sister and some of Brad's relatives, accusing us of being too harsh toward his ex-wife. Jessie herself had also sent me several extremely unpleasant messages, which I didn't even bother to finish reading. Were we really the assholes for kicking Jessie out of our wedding? So, before we move on to the update, I suggest you write in the comments right now what you think about this whole situation. Personally, I believe the author and her fiancé acted absolutely reasonably here, and as in many similar stories involving toxic people, they should have taken care of consequences. Everything would have been fine if they had simply made sure that woman wasn't allowed at the wedding. Then the day wouldn't have been ruined. It is what it is, though, and the bride has absolutely no reason to feel guilty about what happened. Now, let's find out what happened next. Update 1. Thank you all for the comments and the support I've been receiving since I posted this story a week ago. It's pretty clear that most of you think we did the right thing by kicking her out of the wedding, and that we should have gone to the police earlier because of Jessie's toxic behavior. You're right, we really could have involved the police sooner, but what stopped us was the thought of Thomas. We don't want to make his life harder, so we've always tried to handle things peacefully. However, it seems Jessie has no intention of respecting our personal boundaries. I also talked to my childhood friends to find out who exactly told Jessie such private details about me. It turned out that one of them got too drunk that night at the engagement party and carelessly blurted out my secret after. Jessie kept asking questions about my past. That friend apologized when I spoke to her, but sadly, our relationship will never be the same. I understand that she was drunk and made a mistake, but Jessie took advantage of it to try and ruin our wedding. What hurts the most is knowing that Jessie not only used my past against me, but also dragged Thomas into this conflict. Brad understands that perfectly, and he's now consulting with a lawyer to figure out how to arrange joint custody of Thomas in a way that prevents Jessie from continuing to make our lives miserable. Update 2. Hey guys, I know it's been 2 weeks since the last update, but nothing significant happened until yesterday, so there wasn't much to write about. Yesterday, Brad's parents invited me, Brad, and Jessie for an official discussion about Thomas. They hadn't spoken to Jessie since the wedding scandal and had been ignoring her calls, which came as a shock to her. When we all met, Brad's parents immediately made it clear that they respect Jessie as the mother of their grandson and as Brad's ex-wife. However, they emphasized that they would defend me at any cost, since I'm now their son's wife and they love me like their own daughter. They firmly told Jessie that they would not tolerate any more disrespectful behavior toward me, especially after what she did at our wedding. They also warned her that if she continued acting so shamelessly, they were ready to take her to court. This clearly came as a surprise to Jessie, since Brad's parents had always been kind to her. I decided to take the opportunity to be completely honest and told Brad's parents about my miscarriage before Jessie could use that information to manipulate them. To my surprise, Brad's parents didn't judge me at all. They understood the pain I had gone through. Brad's mother, Martha, turned to Jessie and asked, "Is this the secret you wanted to expose in front of everyone?" Jessie nodded and said she couldn't trust me around Thomas because I was a bad person. Martha asked her to explain herself, and Jessie had a full-blown meltdown, claiming that I had intentionally provoked the miscarriage and that I could never be a good mother. She added that she was just trying to protect Brad from a gold digger like me. The expressions on Brad's parents' faces changed from confusion to deep disappointment. Martha sharply told Jessie that she had absolutely no right to say such things about me, especially since the miscarriage had been sudden and unpredictable. Brad's parents, who had stayed neutral for so long, finally realized how serious the situation was and expressed regret for not stepping in sooner to protect me from all of this. Brad also stood up for me, telling Jessie she had no idea what she was talking about and demanding that she stop interfering in our marriage. He took the opportunity to set clear boundaries. He announced that Jessie would no longer be welcome in his parents' house until she apologized for her unacceptable behavior. He also made it clear that any further attempts to harass or threaten us would have legal consequences. Jessie began protesting, insisting that he couldn't treat her that way because she was the mother of his child. However, Brad remained firm, stating that she was strictly forbidden from contacting me or coming to our home when he wasn't around. He also warned her that he had already gathered evidence, consulted with lawyers, and was ready to take legal action if she continued her toxic and aggressive behavior. Seeing a united front and realizing how serious the threat of a lawsuit was, Jessie reluctantly agreed. Honestly, I'm just glad we finally confronted her openly, despite how uncomfortable that meeting was. It felt good to have my in-laws take my side and support me. Before that, I'd had to deal with Jessie's attacks almost entirely on my own. I don't know if Jessie will ever truly change, but I'm just happy that I no longer have to see her, and for now, that's more than enough. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update. Brad and I are doing great, and my relationship with Thomas has improved significantly over the past few months. I know many of you expected Jessie to keep causing problems, but surprisingly, after being threatened with legal consequences, she stopped interfering in my life and now only communicates with Brad about their child's upbringing. She still doesn't like it when I cook for Thomas or do his laundry, but overall, she keeps her distance. Thomas, now feeling a sense of stability, has become much calmer and more positive about the whole co-parenting situation. We continue to celebrate important moments in his life together, and he's surrounded by love and support from everyone who cares about him. Recently, we went on a mountain trip with Thomas, and I taught him how to ski. He's incredibly smart and learns fast, so he picked it up almost instantly. He's as much of an adventure lover as I am, so next summer, we're planning to learn surfing together. I don't know how long this peaceful period will last, but I truly hope Jessie keeps respecting our boundaries and allows Thomas to grow up in an environment free from unnecessary conflict. Well, that's all for today's story. Thank you for listening to the end. Make sure to check out our previous videos. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And good luck to you all!